My name's Matt Williams and I'm the Collections Manager here at Bath Royal Literary and Scientific Institution. So I've been asked to talk about what I do and why I do it. A Collections Manager is another name for a museum curator. In fact, Collections Manager involves a lot of roles, not just museum curation, but it involves conservation and it involves working with researchers and that kind of thing. So I'm just going to walk you through some of what I do, why I think it's interesting and why I do it. So the first thing that I do is I look after our museum collection. The museum collection at Bath Royal Literary and Scientific Institution includes natural history, human history and geology, as well as a library and an archive. So I look after almost or somewhere around 150,000 objects. That's everything from swords and spears and guns through to natural history objects like these mounted antlers. So I do a lot of research into the collections to make sure that all the information that we have with them is relevant. For example, this thing that I've got my hand on here, this is the end of a Cossack lance from the Crimean War of the 1850s. And that allows us to place those objects in a good context so people understand what they're seeing when it's on display in a museum. I also produce exhibitions. So I help put together exhibitions that are interesting so that you can come into a museum and discover something about the world, about its history, and about the animals and fossils of its past. We also work on conserving and caring for the objects and making sure that they're clean, that they're kept in an environment that they don't break down in. Anyone who's left a nail outside will know that it often goes rusty. Well, we have to keep the humidity in the storerooms low so that things like swords don't go rusty over time. We have to keep everything very stable. We often also have to watch out for pests because some pests like mice or like woodworm can eat away at parts of the collection, and so we have to monitor for them and stop pests getting in. We also work with researchers. So some of the stuff that we've got in the collection is very old and very interesting. For example, we've got some fossils from a place called Strawberry Bank in Ilminster, ancient marine reptiles from when Somerset was underneath a warm, shallow tropical sea. And we've been using modern research techniques to understand why those animals lived there and how they lived and how they interacted with each other. So we work with researchers across the world on different projects. I think it's self-explanatory why it's exciting, because I work with all of these amazing things. I get to handle stuff from long ago and learn about the world every day that I'm working here. I work with a great team of people and it's really fun. So I got the job because I studied geology. Geology is the study of rocks, and when I was studying geology, I got to do some work experience in the National Museum of Wales. I worked with the keeper of fossils there, and he was pleased with the work that I did, and he invited me later on to work there for 11 months before I did my master's degree. So in the National Museum of Wales, I worked cataloguing fossils from all around the country and putting labels on them. And then I studied other fossils, including tiny early mammals, for a year in my master's degree, which was in Bristol. But for the past 20 years, which is longer than any of you have lived, I've been working here at Bath Royal Literary and Scientific Institution, and it's been a big adventure and I wouldn't change it for all the world. Every museum object is important, and so we have to handle them quite carefully. Many of the objects in our collection are unique, meaning that there are only one of them. This is an example. This is an ichthyosaur skull, a marine reptile skull from the Jurassic of Somerset. This is its eye and this is its snout. So there's only one of these, of this species, with this kind of preservation, and so we have to handle it very carefully. I don't need gloves for handling this because I've got clean hands, but you can see that it's very slender. So we always handle it on a padded surface. We pick it up very carefully with 2 hands. If I was to carry it somewhere, we'd need to plan our route so that we didn't have to open any doors while holding it, so that it could be supported very carefully. And you need to be really mindful. You can't casually be carrying this around because it's delicate, and if it gets broken, it can't really be fixed. This is a very different object to the ichthyosaur skull we just looked at. This is a sword from the English Civil War, so it's several hundred years old. It's still sharp, so it has to be held a little carefully for my sake, because this edge could still cut me, and it's got a very sharp point. But also, these mortuary swords, as they're called, as I said, they're very old, and it's steel, so it can be corroded quite easily, and the reason it's dark brown like this is because it has been rusted in the past. So this is essentially polished rust now, this surface. There's no active rust on here, so it's not corroding currently. But if my fingerprints were to get on it, there's lots of acid in the skin of your fingers, and so the metal is vulnerable to corrosion, and the acid can eat away at the metal. So I always handle metal objects with gloves. So the final object that I'm going to show you how to handle carefully and safely is a book. But this, although it looks like a book, is actually a protective case for a much older book that's within it. And the reason it's a protective case is the binding of this book is quite vulnerable. So we use this ribbon to lift it out of its case. And you can see that there's cracks in the spine. And the leather is very old. And the reason for that is this book was written in 1663 and published then. And so when we're handling a book like this, handle it very carefully. We won't open the spine very far. We'll keep it supported the whole time. And you should treat books with respect anyway, because they can last a long time when they're made of good paper like this. And each of the pages, I'm just touching very lightly on the edge, and I'm not going to put my hand on the page itself because I don't want to discolour the paper over time. You can see that the edges of the book are rather more yellow than the inside, and that's because there's more dirt on the outside. The reason I'm not using gloves is because your fingers are very, very sensitive, and you can feel the slight edge of it very safely. If I was wearing gloves, particularly those white gloves you see on Antiques Roadshow, those reduce the touch that you've got in your fingertips and can cause you to damage the pages. So many of the big libraries won't use gloves for books, and I don't either. The pages are still flexible, but you've just got to be very careful.